Alright, so this is the voiceover version of this particular video. The main objective for me in this video is to produce a biface or a finished blade that is as clean and step-free and as large and as thin as possible. Okay, so I'm going to be taking measurements during the video at several locations just so I can keep track of my progress, because I am going to try to maximize everything. Maximize the size, maximize the, well, I don't know if maximize is the correct word to use, but I'm going to try to make it as thin as possible and as clean as possible and as symmetrical as possible. And with all of these traits, a lot of width is lost, especially if you're a new guy trying to get the perfect blade. You're going to lose a lot of width, and I'm going to lose a lot of width in this one too, but hopefully I can show you how to prepare the edges so that when you do remove flakes, you remove the minimum amount of edge with the maximum amount of thickness within reason. Now this stuff is very brittle. You can see that I can easily remove material with the abrader. So I'm using it kind of like a hammerstone right now. I tapped on it a little bit earlier to hear the ring of the stone, to see if there's any cracks in it, just as a little test. I have knapped flint ridge in the past, and it has had issues with cracks and so forth. This is heat treated, so it's even more prone to having issues like cracks and weak areas and things like that. But as you can see, I can produce really thin flakes with just the abrader, pretty good size flakes. But mainly what I'm doing here is strengthening the edge, because I'm going to be doing some direct percussion. There's no real procedure for strengthening the edge other than trying to eliminate all of the delicate areas. It's pretty obvious. Now before I start the percussion on the biface with this aluminum, I'm going to make sure that the surfaces are as flat and free of rock chips as possible with this abrader. I don't want to use the sander in this video because the non-narrated version is intended for people who want to relax and just listen to flint knapping noises, and that's it. This version here, I'm going to try to explain everything I'm doing. Right now I'm regularizing after, smoothing out the surfaces of the billet. This billet is aluminum. It's 3 3/4 inches long, inch and a half diameter, 6061 aluminum. Okay, I have a video on my current tools. It's in there, except I forgot to measure the length of it. This one is 3 3/4 inches long. It started out as 4 inches. You can buy this stuff on eBay. It's a cutoff from some sort of industrial process. Basically waste from an industrial process, and they just sell these cutoffs. Anyway, that's where you get this diameter. You may be able to get smaller diameters at a hardware store or something. I'm not sure exactly. I always buy my aluminum off of eBay, so but I'll check the hardware stores. I'm also going to be using copper, but the two primary materials I'm using in this one are copper and aluminum. I was using steel for a long time, but I'm going back to the copper and aluminum mainly because it's less harsh on the material. And I want to be making thinner and thinner blades as time goes on. It's hard to make a thin blade with steel because it'll crack and smash the edge, and a lot of these cracks and smashes have incipient fractures that will open up as you try to thin it down. You'll get unexpected breakages. Same thing happens if you use a hammerstone toward the very end of the process, or if you use a hammerstone a lot and you try to thin down the piece as much as possible with the hammerstone. If it's a hard hammerstone or on the hard side, it does leave incipient fractures as well, and as you're trying to do some other type of work, maybe with a antler billet or a pressure flaker, it will unexpectedly snap at one of those incipient fractures. All right, so the moral of the story is it's better to use stuff on the softer side if you want to make thin bifaces in general. There are exceptions to that, especially if you have a very difficult material to work with. This particular type of material is extremely easy to knap. This heat-treated flint ridge snaps so easily. You can see by this particular strike that it didn't take much power to generate a very long flake. I think you can see, you can probably listen to the volume of the strike and know that I'm not really hitting it all that hard, and I'm producing some very long flakes, comparatively speaking, compared to a difficult to knap material, you know, like a very hard raw chert or rhyolite. Yeah, this stuff naps almost too easily. Yeah, it grinds down well also. So it's actually a pleasure to work, but it gets me nervous because at any point, at any time, everything could break. I mean, it could break, and then everything is pretty much a waste of time. All right, so yeah, so I'm able to generate the flakes where I want without much difficulty, which is nice. Very, very nice. I'm being very careful with the edges because I don't want any weird incipient fractures on the edges. If I don't create a strong edge, it crushes, it tends to crush and be more unpredictable. Yeah, these are extremely nice flakes. Yeah, the crushed edges and incipient cracks make the whole process more unpredictable. So throughout this whole process with this particular biface, I'm going to be as careful as possible to remove flakes in the most methodical way that I can within my style. I didn't change my style all that much for this, except I'm a lot more careful and a lot less expedient in this particular video. Now here I'm pausing a little bit because I'm on the verge of installing a curve in the blade if I take too much off of one side. So I'm looking at the other side. There's an original surface on here. It has a little bit of patina. I need to get rid of all that. I haven't tried to remove the patina in another way. Sometimes you can wipe it off by just washing it. It might be just discoloration from dirt or something, but on this particular one I'm not going to try anything like that. I'm just going to flake it off just so I can show you. Now this particular piece is not going to be available in the auction. This is a piece that was sent to me that was a rock challenge basically. So this is a side project. Alright, so yeah, these flakes are coming off nicely, but I can't take it for granted. Yeah. I got to focus my attention, and I've got to be extremely careful, although it's very nice working with good material. So all that focus and serious concentration is not really that stressful. With something like this kind of material, the focus and the attention is not really a chore. Yeah, because the flakes go pretty much where they're supposed to go. Yep. Once you have everything right, it's easy to mess this stuff up. As you will see in the future, since this is a voiceover, I already know what's going to happen. And you'll see that there's going to be some mess ups in the video a little bit later on. This is quite a long video. It's going to be 2 hours, so the interesting thing about this particular video, there's a couple of firsts. First of all, I've changed the position in the van that I'm working. I'm working now in the second row seats back instead of the trunk. Right? I'm working behind the passenger front seat. The other major change is the let me think here. I lost my train of thought there, but there's another aspect to this. Anyway, I did change the position in the van because it's easier for me to get in and out of the van. It's also easier for me to regulate the heat. Since I'll be working in the wintertime, I'm going to need a heater, right? So it's easier for me to manipulate the heater, both the car heater itself and another separate heater, if I'm in this position. Oh, I know what the other thing was. I'm going to be trying to do these videos in 2 versions. One no talk and one as a director's cut. So that's the other thing. I'm napping in a different place in the van, and I'm also going to be doing these videos as a director's cut and a no talk. And on the no talk video, I didn't do it on this one, but on the next, on some of the ones coming up, I'm going to try to include some nature sounds in the background. Here in Midland and in Texas, I can't really get away from traffic sounds, so I can't really record nature sounds easily. Even if I go out to a remote dirt road or something, there's still airplane sounds and stuff like that. So I may just try to incorporate free nature sounds or something like that into the video. You know, public domain type of stuff, but we'll see. It's much easier to record nature sounds up in New Hampshire or in Vermont than it is here. So anyway, being in the van recording videos is always a lot quieter. So hopefully this format will work well. And another thing I just thought of was this particular Wi-Fi setup we have at the house is excellent. This is a 2-hour video. It uploaded in less than 20 minutes. So I'm very excited about that. Normally a 2-hour, or to upload 2 hours of video where I was in Vermont would take me, I think it was up to 8 hours for a 30-minute video. So what is that? 36 hours for a 2-hour video. That's what it would take. Alright, anyway, let's get back to explaining this. Right now I took a pause. I think I'm removing my shirt, my outer shirt, so that this next stressful stage is not going to get me overheated. Yeah. This is a stage where I start to sweat, because I'll be hitting this with indirect percussion. It's been a long time since I've used indirect percussion on heat-treated stuff like Flint Ridge, which is quite delicate. It's a lot like Keokuk, in my opinion, the high-quality Keokuk stuff. Very, very brittle, very easy to step fracture, very easy to snap in half, very easy to ruin. So, any kind of percussion, direct or indirect, is quite nerve-wracking, and if you combine it with thinness of the workpiece, it's very, very risky. So right now I'm preparing the surface of the tip of the flaker. Make sure there's no embedded rock, which interferes with the flake initiation. And I have to make sure that the surface is smooth. That way it makes good contact. Alright, so I start out here with a test flake near the tip. Worked out very well. Another test flake. It looks like it's going to be working very well. And I'll start hitting the hardest or the most lumpy spots first on the ends. I work the ends first, the tip and the base. And the lumpiest areas on the tip and the base first. That's my personal rule. I always work the ends before working the middle. I got an unusual crack there, so hopefully that's not going to rear its ugly head in the future. Looks like it's okay. As far as I remember, there were no issues with that particular side, I don't think. Sometimes I can tell if there's going to be issues with one particular side or the other. This one seems okay. You know, when there's a difference in color, sometimes there's a difference in consistency of the material. And I was kind of afraid with this particular piece that there was going to be a difference, but it doesn't seem like it. So yeah, I'm going to be doing a lot of abrading in between all these passes with the indirect percussion flaker. Some of it will be opportunistic flaking with the indirect percussion. Some of it will be prepared as much as I can platforms to remove certain flakes. Now that one was nice. I was able to skin off a bunch of the original surface. That was nice. I'm not removing a whole lot of material. I'm just trying to skin the surface on with these particular strikes here. So I'm not seeing a real good opportunity to skin a bunch off. And I'm seeing a crack that looks like it could be an issue, right? But you never know with the Flint Ridge. It could be a healed crack, so I'm going to keep going with it. You know, it sounds good. It rings when I hit the biface, so that's an indicator that it's solid, so I'm just going to keep going. But it does make me nervous if I see a crack. Yeah, it sounds really good. Alright, so I'm just going to not ignore the crack, but I'm just going to nap it like there wasn't a crack in there, pretty much. And I'm going to get this as thin as possible, within reason, as wide as possible, and as clean as possible as far as the flake scars on the surface. I'm going to be attacking any step fractures or islands or any issues on the surface. Sometimes there's a lot of flaking, a lot of clutter in the flake scars, and I will send in a big flake to remove that so I can get a nice smooth surface. I like big bold flakes because they provide a nice clean surface. Alright, so I zigzag the thick areas a lot of times. It's just one of the easiest techniques. Downward strikes here. And I didn't abrade there, but it still removed a nice flake. But I'm going to try to abrade as much as I can. If I don't abrade, I get things like that. You know, step fracture because, you know, the edge was too delicate. It wasn't able to transfer the full force into the flake or into the fracture. So it stepped. So yeah, I'm going to be abrading a lot, hopefully. But yeah, this particular spot, you can see that I abraded a little too much. There's deposits of aluminum on the edge there, so I'm either going to have to sneak up on it by coming in from the side, or I'm going to have to pressure flake it to get it recontoured. It looks like, yeah, I can sneak up on this one. Yeah, you just start flaking next to the area that's abraded a lot, and then just kind of keep going. You know, as you're striking flakes off, it thins down the edge so that you can make a pass on an extremely aggressively abraded edge. You can make a pass just by doing the next flake close to where the flake before originated. The edge will be thinner there, less robust, so you don't have to go back with a pressure flaker and recontour it. Anyway, yeah, I'm brushing back a lot of these edges. It regularizes it a little bit. Since it's easy to flake with the abrader, I can actually regularize it with the abrader instead of regularizing it with the percussion tool or a pressure flaker. Yeah, I'm doing a little cheat move right there with hitting the face of the step fracture to try to get it to go. It didn't go quite as well as I hoped. It kind of dove in, so I can't be doing that. So I just abraded the surface a little bit, make it smoother, and then tried to flake over the top of it. Did not work that well, but it did produce a nice, big, bold, wide flake, which is nice. I can get that little dive in a little bit later, or I might leave it in. Nice flakes. There was a bunch of flakes that came off at the termination. It traveled a little bit further, which is always nice. You know, instead of step fracturing, it's the opposite. It actually goes further than you expect. This one did too. It went a little bit further than I expected, which is nice. It's getting to the point where I've got to be very careful about where I hit. because it's already getting pretty flat. And I think I kind of avoided thinning the base here a little bit earlier when I should have probably thinned it before I worked on the middle, but I got distracted and worked on the middle. It's not all that thin in the middle, so it's still pretty good, but I'm still hesitating to hit hard, and that's what produced that particular step fracture. I didn't hit hard enough to send that flake as far as I needed it to. Now here's where I risk a bunch of, well, this is where I take a risk, because I'm hitting right at the tip of the base, right at the place where it could snap the whole thing in half, just so I can clean up that step fracture. I'm hitting kind of up from the very bottom, so I'm hitting not up toward the tip, but just across. Yeah, so sometimes that works well, and if you can do it, that's how I recommend thinning the base, by hitting the sides instead of hitting it directly from the bottom. Now, I'm not going to explain every single platform preparation, or I'm not going to explain all the edge prep. That's pretty self-evident from the video, especially if you guys are watching it on a bigger screen. You can kind of see, hopefully, how I prepare the edges. And hopefully from my other videos you can gather how I prepare these edges. You've got to kind of judge how much to abrade depending on the material. Sometimes the material requires a lot of abrading, sometimes it doesn't. This material, this Flint Ridge, is kind of in the middle. Not too much, not too little. There are some materials that require a lot of abrading and some barely any. And it's up to the material as well. Sometimes it's very, very hard to abrade it. So you're sitting there, seemingly it looks like you're abrading and abrading, but you're not getting very far. So if you watch some of my videos with really hard, tough stone, it looks like I'm abrading a lot, but actually I'm not making much progress. I don't need to abrade that much, but the little that I am abrading isn't doing much. So I had to look like I'm abrading a lot when I'm actually not. So you got to pay attention to the edges more than just the act of abrading. Look at the edges on my workpiece as I'm making it to see how dull the edges are. And just be aware that sometimes, even though it looks like I'm abrading a lot, it may not be actually abraded very much because of the toughness of the stone. Okay, so I think I've thinned down the base enough to satisfy the thinness requirement. And I think I'm going to, let's see, maybe one more flake into that area to get rid of the bump. Then I should be done for now on the base. Yeah, I'm abrading a lot more than I usually do. Being very careful. I'm not necessarily pushing hard to get a real robust edge or anything like that. I'm just doing spending a lot more time abrading. So yeah, that flake did well, and that one did too, very, very well. I was surprised that I was able to get those two flakes. Yeah. So I'm going to get ready for another pass here. It's a little bit crunchy on this side, which means that the flake scars are a little bit messy. So I'll have to wait and see if I can clean that up. I should be able to. So yeah, it's getting a little stressful again, and I need to get comfortable, so I make sure I remove any flakes or anything from my gloves. Whatever else I can think of. Let's see. I'm going to take a measurement here. Yeah, I'm not going to do any math. And as far as the narration goes, you guys can figure that out as it goes along. The preform's coming out pretty good. I don't really need to go thin with it to make a reproduction of something. But everyone wants to see how thin I can go and how clean I can get it, because that's what they're having trouble with. Everyone wants to know how to maximize thinness, cleanness, and maximum size from the piece of stone that they're starting with. So that's what I'm going to do in this video. And again, cleanness means lack of step fractures and lack of excessive flaking, areas that just don't look smooth. Yeah, so I'll be attacking defects that I normally would just leave in, you know. A lot of times I'll just leave it in. But on this one, I'm going to try to eliminate as much as I can as far as the defects on the surface. Now, since this is a voiceover, I may get distracted. I can't hear the sounds when I'm doing this voiceover, so I'm not able to explain to you the subtleties of the noises when you're flint knapping. But sometimes the sounds of the flint knapping can help you determine what's going on. You know, if your tool's working well, you're going to hear nice clean snaps. If your technique is working well, you're going to experience less crushing noises. And once in a while, you'll hear the little ring of the biface if it's nice and solid. If you don't hear a ring somewhere during the process, if it stops ringing, if it starts to sound like a dull thud, you got a crack in it somewhere. And I keep checking that crack. It looks pretty ominous. It looks dangerous, but apparently it's not harming it at all. It still rings. It just looks pretty bad. So I think what they call that is a healed fracture. H-E-A-L-E-D, healed fracture. Probably part of the original stone. I say probably, but that's what it is. Yeah, natural forces will crack the stone, and then, you know, it remains in the ground for millions of years, and over time, those cracks fill in with minerals, and it solidifies, and you've got a healed fracture. Yeah, so periodically we got to clean up the tip, make sure it's nice and smooth, make sure there's no rock fragments or chips embedded in the aluminum. It's very easy to get lazy about cleaning off the aluminum, which you'll run into problems because aluminum is like a chip magnet. Yeah, little flakes will become embedded in the aluminum extremely easily. It's not like steel, you know, they'll embed themselves in steel as well, but the layer is just right on the upper crust of the steel, the layer where the chips may be embedded. It's a very fine little layer, but with aluminum, a flake can go fairly deep. So you'll be cleaning the tools more often and more extensively, which wears down the aluminum faster than steel would wear down in the same situation. So here I'm just regularizing and looking for opportunities to send in flakes, trying to shape and thin at the same time. And by shaping, I mean, you know, the outline, shaping the outline, keeping it symmetrical as much as I can. Later on in the video, I won't be able to keep it as symmetrical as I'm trying to keep it right now, because there are going to be issues that I'm going to have to lose some width to deal with. But this is later on in the video. Right now I'm trying to keep it as symmetrical as possible and be as careful as possible about reducing this biface at this stage. Yeah, that was a hard hit. I remember these hits with these larger flakes are pretty hard compared to most flakes. And you can kind of tell when I hit hard. You can listen to the volume, but you can also tell by the size of the platform, how robust the edge is, and then the resulting flake. These are going to be hard hits coming up here in the center. You know, after I thin the ends down, I go for the center and I go for hard hits. If I have heavy ends, like a heavy tip and base, and I go for these hard hits, it's very likely that I'll break the whole thing in half. Alright, so I'm looking at what I need to remove to straighten it out. I want to try to get it as straight as possible, as early as possible. That way, yeah, tip breaks off. That way I'll be able to reduce it in a more methodical way. Now that tip, I'm not sure exactly why that broke. It's probably because I made the edge too strong and hit too hard, but there could have been an incipient crack in there or a defect in the stone. But I'm going to chalk this mistake up to too much force on an edge that was too robust. I took too many chances, and that hurt, you know, taking that chance, kind of getting spoiled with the material, thinking it would flake easily, and instead it just snapped off the tip. That took a bunch off, which is unfortunate. I remember feeling like I lost my focus and didn't know what I was doing there for a second. Yeah, I'm not quite sure exactly. Since this is the voiceover, I don't really remember what I was thinking at that particular time. Why I was thinking that tip was strong enough to withstand those hard hits. So I'm going to be very, very careful with the tip from here on in. Yeah, from this point on, I'm going to be very careful with the tip. So yeah, this is just a typical repair. I go around looking for opportunistic areas to hit. I'll zigzag it sometimes. If I really want to do it quickly, I'll just zigzag the brake. But on this one, I just opportunistically took some flakes off. And I kind of left it for later. And then right now I'm looking for lumps that I can get rid of. Still in the process of making it very regular and flat for the final passes. Trying to make it easy on myself for the final finish work. Relatively easy. Yeah, if the preform is very regular and I get rid of mistakes like what I'm doing right now, like those step fractured areas and stuff, if I get everything nice and smooth, it's so much easier toward the end of the process. I don't have to do damage control at the end when it's very thin. It's going to turn out that I am going to do damage control at the end of this, but in general, getting it very regular at this stage, it does help. If that's what you're after. If what you're after is a very, very clean surface, something cosmetically pleasing, then yeah, you make it as regular as you can. On the real artifacts, many times, that's not the way they did it. They just went for the basic shape. And if there was step fractures, oh well. If there was crushing on the edge, oh well. Just looking for the basic shape, and can you haft it? And can you put an edge on it? And that's it. Does it fit in the haft? Is it thin enough to fit in the haft? Yes, then that's it. The cosmetic look of the piece is secondary in almost all artifacts. There are some that are built to be beautiful, but in the vast majority of cases, they'll just leave in the defects. They'll be expedient about creating the biface and the finished product. Yeah, I've got a lot of real bifaces from real archaeological sites, and they are some of the crudest pieces I've ever seen. They don't make well, in many cases, they don't make the bifaces cosmetically pleasing in any way. There's step fractures all over the place. There's uneven edges. There are places where they should have abraded and they didn't. You know, there's incipient cracks, and you know, there's broken bifaces, broken in manufacture. I've got several of those. I like looking at the different pieces and seeing how they broke them. Sometimes you can't tell. Sometimes it looks like they might have just dropped it and just broke it that way. But, you know, sometimes you can see where their last strike was, and it's right there where it's split or cracked. On this particular piece, I was afraid to crack it like during these strikes right here. These are cleanup strikes, right? So it's pretty clean right now. And I think I remember thinking to myself, you know what? It's going to get very difficult to thin this down now. if I want to go any thinner, which I do, so I can show it on video. But I was pretty pleased with it at this point. Yeah, I was thinking everything was going really well at this point. So the next stage is thinning. Yeah, I did do thinning, you know, obviously on this biface, but the next thinning stage is very intense. It's stressful. So I'm measuring it right now. This would be the stage where it would be a trade blank, which you can trade it for, or use it for money. You can trade it for stuff. It's a perfect little preform for a blade. I say little, but it's a perfect preform for a blade, and you can trade it. It has a lot of potential. You can make many different point styles from it, or sharpen the edges right now and just use it as a blade, as a knife. Now, did they make many different point styles in one particular period of time? Actually, I think they had at least 2 point styles in every time period. At least 2, sometimes 3 or 4. So your biface or your trade blank can be made into 3 or 4 different types of points. Sometimes different types of blades. You know, no notching or anything. Nothing really all that distinctive. Just different types of blades. I think some blades were actually chipped so they could be saws, and some were chipped so they could be butcher knives to cut meat, and some were chipped so that they could be used to flesh hides, you know, that sort of thing. Some had bevels on them, some did not. It could be the same time period where some of the knives or blades had bevels and some of them didn't, side by side, for different purposes. Just something to think about. So now I'm regularizing the tip. Making it as smooth as possible. Yeah, there's a step fracture there at the tip, or near the tip, that I need to get rid of, but I'm going to wait. This stuff pressure flakes so well. I was amazed. You know, I've seen videos where guys are pressure flaking this, and I can see that the pressure flaking is quite pleasurable on this. You know, I'll see videos of people knapping Flint Ridge with like 80% pressure flaking. I never want to do that much pressure flaking, but you know, this particular material is an exception. It's very nice to pressure flake. Almost too easy. So I'm just regularizing it. There's some really fat, lumpy spots that can be removed with pressure, and it'll spoil you. A lot of times with tough stone, you can't do this. You can't remove those big old lumpy areas easily with pressure. I'd use indirect percussion. If it's a really tough stone, I use indirect percussion for what I'm doing right now. But since this is so easily flaked, I'm using the pressure flaker. And I'm using a copper pressure flaker on top of that. Copper is softer than steel, and the copper is not wearing down very fast. Which means, you know, obviously the material is easy to flake. Otherwise, my copper tip would be wearing down really fast. it's not wearing down hardly at all. And I'm not getting fatigued hardly at all. So not much of braiding is necessary. Well, it wasn't. Especially at this stage, it's not really vital that I get the edges perfect. I just want to make them more regular. And I think in this case, I'm trying to move the edge to one side. It doesn't really require all that much skill or prep to get the edges turned to one side. The exception being at the tip, where it is kind of important to make sure you don't put in a curve or step fracture or whatever. Yeah, a lot of times you can install a curve at the tip so the tip starts to curve in one direction or the other. I want to make sure everything's symmetrical, both in the side view and the face view or front view. I'm getting used to focusing in on the spot that I want everyone to see, even though I have to keep manipulating the focus. I'm getting used to it. Hopefully it'll become second nature. That way I can focus on the napping instead of focusing on the focus. Yeah. So I'm just going to do a pass to make the edge more regular. Now I was turning it to one side. I'm not sure if this is the same side I was working on earlier. This is probably the other side. Yeah. Although I can't remember. Yeah, it flakes so nice with pressure. Yep. Nice flake. Yeah, if I was smart, I'd probably call it good at this stage after sharpening it. I can sharpen it right now and then call it good. But since it's a video, I said I wasn't going to do it, but I'm tending to just do stuff only for the video. And making it as thin as possible is one of those things. Yeah, not much maintenance on that copper. I normally don't try to pressure flake through a step fracture. But I want to see how it works with this one, with this material. It worked all right, but I'm not going to push my luck. So I'm going to wait to remove the rest of that step fracture with indirect percussion. Right? I should be, well, I might do it right now, but I was going to, if I remember correctly, I was going to wait until later. So I'm just doing a general cleanup of the delicate spots just by brushing them off with the braider. Not much actual grinding, it's mostly brushing at this stage. I think I'll grind here in a minute. Right when when I can see the areas I want to strike, I'll grind them down even more. But right now I'm just getting rid of the delicate edges. And this does take width off the workpiece. So every time you grind or brush to remove delicate edges, you're losing about 1/16 of an inch minimum. Maybe not off of each side, but maybe in combination, total 1/16 of an inch every time you do that, or 30/2 of an inch off of each side. It still adds up. All right, so yeah, I took off that step fracture using indirect percussion, and it sets me up for running a pass down that side. In theory, as long as I don't mess up. You know, statistically, you gotta watch it. You gotta kind of watch it because, you know, it's hard to have a perfect streak all the way down. You know, it's hard to get the odds in your favor as you're making a pass. It helps to have nice material. Yeah, it steps right there, but I can get it from the other side. I'm pretty sure I just continue with the pass on this side. I'm not worried about the step fractures that develop because I can get them from the other side. Even though it's right directly in the middle, which is not a great spot, it's still not too bad. It's better if it steps fractures a little bit past center line because then you can get it from the other side much easier. These will look like they're step fracturing right at center line, so it's a little bit more of a challenge. It's not too bad. But yeah, at this stage I'm losing a lot of width so that I can get the edges right to run flakes to the center or a little bit beyond the center. It looks like they're going right to the center, which is not exactly what I want. It's better than nothing, but it'd be a lot better if they ran further. So I tried to force the issue. It didn't quite work. Sometimes you can force the issue and then break through that barrier of step fractures, but in this case I didn't. But it's still not too bad. I can get that stuff from the other side, theoretically. And I think I do manage to do that fairly easily, but I have to do it in a kind of a roundabout way, looking for other opportunities to thin down the biface in other areas first. So I'm doing a dance of opportunistic flaking along with deliberate damage control. You know, trying to do both at the same time. Yeah, I think I'm not sure if it's this at this point or a little bit further on I start getting impatient with it, because it was napping just the way I wanted to earlier, and now it starts to get finicky. And it's not the material, it's the strategy, you know. Thinning down an already thin piece is very difficult, as I always say. And this is no exception. So I'm doing a little cheater flake there, and it looks like it's not too bad. As far as defects go, I can probably clear that off without much problem, but I'm gonna have to get more narrow. That's the problem. But as long as I'm, you know, not too concerned with how wide it needs to be. This is not a project built to a spec. This is just trying to maximize everything. I'm not really looking at a spec sheet or trying to make this according to a pattern. Alright, so the next series of flakes is going to be crucial. So I'm going to have to be very, very careful about the edges. And you'll see what I mean here when I finish up. I'm removing thick spots, but I'm also making the surface convex. I'm not driving these flakes in very far because I want the surface to be convex. If I drive these flakes in really far, I'm going to get big bulbs of pressure, and I'll have like a hollow ground effect near the edge. I don't want that at this stage. I want some convexity, so the next pass that I do, I'll have less of an issue with these step fractures. And hopefully the flakes will be strong enough to carry further and not step in the middle. You know, if they step after the halfway point, that's good. If I can just get the edge a little more regular so that that can happen, it's worth it. But as I said earlier, I'm going to lose a lot of width. Yeah, the more picky I get about how to clean the surface, or how picky I am about having a clean surface, the more narrow the workpiece tends to get. So it's looking pretty good at this point. I'm pretty happy with it. The only issue now is just to make it as convex near the edge as possible, getting these contours just right. I'm getting used to the material by this stage, and I'm feeling pretty confident. I'm pretty confident in knowing how robust to make the edge so that it'll flake well. Yeah, it does pressure flake easily. I'm going to use some of the waste flakes that come off of this biface. There's some down there that I've already seen that I can use. After the video, well, I may do another Flint Ridge video with the flakes that came off of this biface, just so I can show how to knap one of these thin flakes. Pretty straightforward stuff. Also, if you guys have suggestions on what I can make from the biface, just put them in the comment section. I'm not sure what points in the archaeological record were made from Flint Ridge. The only thing I can think of is maybe a hardened point. I don't know. Flint Ridge really does need to be heat treated in order to work well. I'm sure that they use Flint Ridge without heat treating, but the heat treatment makes it so much better. So if you guys know what points were made from Flint Ridge, just let me know in the comment section. Arrowheads also, arrow points, the small bird points. If you know of any that were made from Flint Ridge, let me know and I'll see if I can make one. Okay, so this is the hard part. When I try to do a deliberate flake from a prepared platform, and as you can see, it ran short. Now, I'm not too worried about that, but it gets annoying over time. You know, you try to prepare it as best you can. The flake runs very well, but just not quite far enough. Yeah. Anyway, I think I was hoping that the rest of these would not do that, but they seem to be doing the same thing, you know. I don't want to blast through these step fractures. I don't want to hit way too hard and cause an overshot or a catastrophic break of the whole thing. That one was a hard hit compared to the other ones, and I did take a bite out of the side there. That's the other hazard, you know, from hitting too hard. You get these bites taken out, which hurts your width. Yeah, that one hurt. But at least I did power through some of that step fracture. It didn't continue all the way down. I've only got it in the middle, which is not too bad. You know, as long as I've got thickness in the middle, step fractures in the middle aren't that big a deal. You know, the center of the biface, both in terms of, you know, from the sides and also from the top and bottom. If they're away from the sides and away from the top and bottom, they're not that difficult to deal with as long as you have plenty of thickness. That one was a good strike. I was pleased with that one. So now I got the problem just right in the middle. You know, sometimes if I have a step fracture or an issue right at the end, either at the tip or near the base, I tend to mess it up and either break the tip off or break the base off. If it's a bad defect. This one's not too bad, even as step fractures go. I mean, I could just leave it in right now. Wouldn't be any big deal. But for the video, I've got to make sure it's as clean as I can possibly get it. I'm trying to think if it's easier for me to take off a step fracture from near the base or the tip, or take off a step fracture from the middle. I think that's a good question. I'm thinking it's easier from the middle, but I may be wrong. Let me think about that for a second. I do like to trim away the step fractures and defects from the ends first, just to follow my procedure of working the ends before working the middle. But I'm pretty sure I have a lot of trouble. Yeah, I do have trouble in the transition areas in the tip and the base. And those transition areas are where you start to need pressure flaking at the very ends, compared to not needing pressure flaking as you approach toward the middle of the blade. You know, you can have big, bold percussion flakes on the sides and toward the middle of the blade, but as it starts getting toward the tip, you need to refine the tips with pressure. And those transition areas are where I sometimes end up with defects, and those, I think, are the hardest ones for me to eliminate. But I need to think about that some more. Anyway, I'm trying to drive in these cosmetic smoothing flakes. That one was really good. If I can do a lot of those smoothing flakes with big, bold, flat flakes, it just is so much better than to try to do a lot of little cleaning flakes. If I can just do a few of those big ones like that, that's what I want. Now, back in the day, a lot of nappers chose to do ribbon flaking and parallel flaking and stuff instead of these big, bold cleaning flakes. They would clean up the surface with parallel flaking. That's another way to do it, I suppose. I just think it's a lot more fatiguing that way. It is for me. I can't be doing all that much heavy pressure or all that much very precise indirect percussion. It's just fatiguing both mentally and physically. And normally I'd be done by now with the blade. I'm just being extra careful with this particular piece. Yeah, I can usually do a blade in about an hour. As long as it's not too thin. So this is all damage control at this stage. It's all just cosmetic flaking. I don't really need to make it any thinner or anything like that in order to make it functional. What I'm doing now is purely cosmetic. And I start going down the road of being a little obsessive. But I think that's what everyone wants to see. Everyone wants to see how to make it as thin as possible, as clean as possible, and as wide as possible, and as long as possible with the material you have available. So that's what I'm going to do. So this is the second or third time I've actually gone back and been very careful about regularizing the edge, right? I've done this at least once before on this particular piece. And normally I only have like one major regularizing episode as far as I can remember. It's a little bit hard when I'm doing the voiceover on this to remember. So I'm trying to pay attention to what I'm actually doing in the video. But yeah, I think I only have one major regularizing episode. The rest of the napping is opportunistic. But on this particular piece, I regularize it quite a bit. So it's a combination of being opportunistic and deliberate, with more on the deliberate side as it gets thinner and thinner. And I'm like right now I'm creating an edge that favors the side that's got the defects so that I can run a pass. See how much I think you can tell there that I've deliberately moved the edge to run a pass to get rid of those defects, those step fractures. And I'm even going further and refining every bit of that edge, just in case. Sometimes I can see where I can remove flakes from either side, so In that case, the edge is going to be kind of wavy because it'll favor one side in one spot and it'll favor another side in another spot, because I'm going to run flakes on different faces. Yep. And getting ready for these crucial strikes. Got to make sure everything's clean on the tool tip. Alright, so here we go. It starts out well, like it did. I usually have no worries about doing the pass. If it doesn't start out well, I'll go back and I'll regularize everything again and make updates to the edge, etc. But this particular pass started out well, so I just kept going with it. It is starting to get kind of dicey because I didn't really go as far as I wanted to on that last flake, but I think I continue. I mean, the edge looks pretty good. I'm just checking that crack there to see if it's... see if I can feel that. It seems pretty well healed up. I'm going to hit pretty hard here. I'm going to hit right next to the crack. Yeah, luckily that did flake and produce pretty much a feather termination, although it's kind of ripply. And I initiated it right there where that healed crack is. That's like the diciest hit of the whole procedure here, in my view. It turns out it wasn't that dicey because the crack is healed up. But at the time I did that particular strike, that was one of those make it or break it strikes. It's either going to break the whole thing or it's going to make it look pretty good. And fortunately, it did help me damage control those step fractures in the middle. It wasn't perfect. I still got some left, but it did a pretty good job of clearing a bunch of that off. Even though the flake is kind of ripply. It would have been nicer if there weren't so many ripples in it, but it's not bad. Now that one, let's see. Yeah, well, I couldn't remember if that had run well or not, but that ran well enough. It's not that great as far as looking nice and clean. It looks all right, but it could be cleaner. And yeah, I obsess over it here in a little while. I think, yeah, I'm gonna lose some width here. I'm gonna go for the cleanest possible surface. So here I go. I remember this part. I'm gonna take back quite a bit of the edge. Yep. Yeah, that was lucky. Alrighty. Yeah, looking back at these strikes, I probably could have made the edge a little bit better, but they worked out okay. The edge looked a little bit too opportunistic there. I could have made it more consistent so to have more of a continuous platform with more options. You know, the more continuous it is, the more places you can potentially hit when you're trying to make your decision on where to hit. If you've got only a few areas, it limits your choices. You know, if you've got opportunistic platforms only. Now that one, I don't know what I did there. Yeah, I'm getting tired now because I think I'm in danger of putting in some incipient cracks in there, and I'm just kind of trying to brush it away. And yeah, that flake ran okay. Yeah, luckily the material is nice. Otherwise, I would have probably messed that one up. I'm starting to slack on my edge preparation. Yeah, I started to use the steel. Well, I grabbed the steel pressure flaker and I immediately said, nope, I need the copper because it just grips the edge better. And I don't want any crushing and stuff. Yeah, don't get me wrong, you can use steel for pressure flaking. It works very well, but this stuff is very crackly and very brittle. It was hard for me to run these cosmetic flakes without any step fractures. It was not easy. You know, I had to make sure the edges were better prepared than normal. I had to make sure the tool tip was better prepared than normal. I had to really think about how much force to use instead of relying mainly on my habit, my subconscious habit brain. I had to rely a lot on my conscious brain on this one. Yeah, because if I just go into this haphazardly using my old habits, I probably would have snapped it. I was very conscious about not snapping this in half. Yeah, all these strikes are pretty dicey. Pretty dicey. And I'm getting to the stage at this or during this attack on these islands in the middle, I start to realize that I'm losing too much thickness. I'm running out of thickness. I can't really get in there with long distance flakes. Yeah, I'm starting to create too much of a concavity in the center here, so I'm going to have to take a lot of the edge away. I'm going to cheat here and try to pick out some of that step fracture, but I'm not going to be able to do it. Not satisfactorily anyway. I can get rid of a little bit. Yeah. It looks fine, but you know, everyone wants to see perfect, so I'm gonna try to get it as perfect as I can. And it's not just because people want to see the perfect, they just want to know how it can be done. If it's possible, people just want to see how it can be done. Most people enjoy the look of the flint knapped biface, pretty much regardless of any of these small defects. Yeah, I was able to remove some of that step fracture with a pressure flake. And I came in, I tried to remove the rest of it with the cheater spatula, but it didn't work. Yeah. I think I do remove that later on, though. But for now, I'm just going to leave it in, I think. Yeah. And just skip it and go on to the next obstacle. Yeah, it's getting to where the obstacles are actually little nitpicky things. They're not really obstacles. Just little bitty nitpicky step fractures that I want to get rid of. Normally, no big deal. You got to get the edge just right here. I remember I sweated over this one, this particular damage control episode. Yeah. I can see I was in danger of installing a curve or too much of a concavity. So I was nervous about this one. Yeah. If the edge feels too delicate, I won't take the shot. And if it doesn't feel right when I put the tool on the edge, I won't take the shot. If I'm being careful. If I'm not being that careful, I'll just take the shot. And I'll just live with what happens. But if I can't just live with what happens, if I have to be really picky about it, I've got to spend more time. But there comes a time where there's diminishing returns. The more you obsess over it, the less chance for success and the more width you're going to lose. And I lost quite a bit of width there. Yeah, and I hit that. I hit that hard and didn't do anything, and I started hitting it harder, and then I said to myself, no. Cannot be doing that. I've got to take it back a little bit more with the pressure flaker. We'll see. See if I remember correctly. Yeah, I lose even more width because I'm still messing with the pressure flaker and trying to get that edge set up to flake with the amount of power I'm using, because I'm not going to use a whole lot of power. I don't want to be using a whole lot of force to get that flake to travel. Now I thought the edge would be delicate enough, but apparently it wasn't. So now I made it a little bit weaker. Let's see what happens. There it goes. Yeah. So yeah, I breathed a sigh of relief after that one, I'm pretty sure. Although now it looks kind of wonky because of the amount of edge I had to remove to get it just right. And now I got one very similar situation on the other side. You know, just a little cosmetic step fracture that needs to be removed. So yeah, gotta prepare the edge. Learn the characteristics from working on the other side. I gotta make sure that edge is not too robust and not too delicate. It's a very subtle thing. Each type of material has subtle differences in the edges. The angles might be the same, but the amount of abrading and that sort of thing, it does change. The amount of abrading and the the overall thickness of the edge, it does vary depending on the material you're using, but it's very subtle. There's not like a big difference between this flint ridge and, let's say, dacite. It's not that much difference, but little bitty differences can make a big impact on the finished piece. Yeah, I'm doing the best I can here, but it still does not look smooth as I think it could be. I'm not sure if I stop here or not. Ooh, I got adventurous with that one. I did not need to take that one. It worked out well, but that's dicey. Yeah, I'm starting to take some chances with this. Yeah. That was dicey, for sure. I don't know. Yeah, I could probably pick some of that out. Yep. Yeah, the smart thing would be just to leave that alone. I can probably get it a lot smoother than that. I'm not sure exactly what I do at this stage. I got to work on some symmetry here, so I've got material I can use to run flakes in, because I got to lose that material anyway. So yeah, I guess I take some more risks on the base. Oh boy. Can't do too much of that. Yeah, I'm absolutely not worried about that healed crack now. I'm really taking some chances on the base. But I want to get it smooth, so you gotta do it. Yeah. Try to be conservative with the flakes and not take too much off, and then you end up with way too many little flakes and it gets all chattery. But luckily that last flake did the trick. Yep. The base looks fine now. Yeah, pretty good ratios. Yeah, overall it's not too bad. I mean, I'm glad at this stage I hadn't broken it yet, other than the tip. But that was it. That's the only major mishap. Is just I broke some off the tip. I think I lost about a ½ inch off the tip. But no major mishaps anywhere on the blade. There was one small bite taken out early. Luckily that was the only one. I don't think I had any other issues with bites or overshots. I'm very happy about that. Yeah, being patient with the edge did pay off quite a bit. It did pay off, being very methodical and patient and using the pressure flaker. Making sure the tool tips are nice and smooth and free of rock chips. Yeah, this is the opportunity when I'm working on the tip. I can thin and shape the tip at the same time. Yeah, I do have trouble with some of these tips. I mean, sometimes I do have trouble, but on this particular one, I was able to shape and thin without too much of an issue. Yeah, it's getting pretty late, and I'm doing the voiceover on this, and it's getting late. I probably won't say too much more about it, other than I'm just being very picky toward the end. I just do a basic sharpening at the end. Right now I'm just doing some regularizing and stuff. I'm going a little bit faster than I should be going, but I think I'm getting impatient. You know, it'd be best to be very careful all the way to the end, because you never know. You can install a step fracture at the very end on a very smooth surface, and it's very frustrating. But yeah, like right there, I think I was very lucky. Yeah, that could have ended in a disaster with a step fracture, but I got lucky on that one. Yeah, I don't need to be thinning too much right now, and I still sent in a couple of thinning flakes there. I think I'm going to do another one here, looks like. No, I just got rid of that step fracture. Some of these are thinning flakes, especially as I get closer to the tip. Yep, pretty much got it to where I need it to be right now. The symmetry is slightly off near the tip. I think I do one more pass to get the symmetry right, and then I start to sharpen it. Well, we'll see. Yeah, I'm doing one more pass here. A little bit dicey. But I'm pretty confident with the material now. I've been working on it for an hour and a half or so. It looks like I got pretty confident with it. All right. Yep, just a bunch of pressure flaking now. And this is aggressive pressure. If you've been watching my channel for a while, you know that I separate pressure into aggressive and passive pressure. This is all aggressive pressure toward the end just to get it sharp. Passive pressure is when you apply pressure and wait and apply more and more pressure and wait until it snaps by itself. With aggressive pressure, you intentionally try to snap it off right where you are expecting it to snap. You're not waiting for it to snap or to initiate by itself. You are forcing the issue. You're being aggressive and pushing a little bit harder than usual just to get the flake to pop right when you want it to pop. So this is all aggressive pressure. Now sometimes when you want long thinning ribbon flakes, you would use passive pressure. I'll get into that in the future. I do need to make an Ishii stick or two. It works well with Ishii sticks. It works well with other flakers too, right? But with the Ishii stick, when you can do heavy pressure, you can generate some really long, nice flakes with passive pressure. So yeah, these are just short flakes. Regularizing everything. Pretty straightforward. I'm regularizing it because I'm going to do a pass on the other side, I think. Yeah, the tip still needs to work on the symmetry. I still need to work on the symmetry on the tip. So that's what I'm going to be doing here. Just taking back the edge. Simple downward force. Almost no inward force at all. Just mainly downward force. Not 90% downward force on this particular type of flaking. Just to shape the edge, that's it. Now when I turn it over to flake the other side, I think I will run some thinning flakes into the body of the workpiece. I'm thinking. Yeah, it looks like I had moved the edge a little bit, favoring one side, but it's a little bit wavy, so one side's favored in one area and the other side's favored in the other area. It's not completely favored to one side, so you'll see as I do the pressure flaking. Oh, I'm going to do percussion, okay. Yeah, I kind of like doing these director cuts, but sometimes I lose track of what I'm doing. But I'll be doing more of these videos. I think that's what I'm going to do. Just silent version to start off with, and then I'll do a director's cut with the narration. All right, so I'm doing indirect percussion to thin out the tip even more, taking more risks. Opportunistic flaking. That's risky because I didn't grind that one ahead of time. That one looked like it already had a dull spot, but I'm taking some risks there because I could install a step fracture. If I don't prepare the edge with abrading or pressure flaking, I'm taking a chance. Yeah, I just installed a little step fracture right there. I think another one's coming up. Yep, right there. I mean, you see these on the real artifacts, but I really don't like installing those. But what can you do? It's nearing the end. I'm getting tired, and I want to get this piece done. This is the hard part, trying to go in between, looking for areas that I hadn't pressure flaked, looking for dull spots that I can really seat the flaker on. There's not many dull spots, so I've got to be very careful that I'm pushing on a spot that at least has a good angle to it so I can get the flaker to seat right. Like right there. As long as the pressure flaker seats, I can make sure I push off a good flake with a good bulb of pressure. That way I'll have kind of like a hollow ground effect and produce a nice sharp edge. Of course, stone will not have a beautifully continuous sharp edge. It'll be intermittently sharp. It'll be more like a saw blade, but it's still very, very sharp. Now I try to show how thin it's getting at the edge, but I'm not sure exactly if it actually conveys that idea. I don't think I zoom in close enough. But you can kind of see how thin the edge gets. There are different ways to do these edge sharpenings. This is my way that I usually do it. I see this on a lot of artifacts, but I also have artifacts that have a different edge treatment for sharpening, and I need to get into the different edge treatments. This is just all jaggedy. There are some that are very deliberate, and there's not jaggedy like this. I've seen artifacts that have very, very patiently flaked edges that are almost perfect. The rest of the point might have step fractures and a wavy blade and all that kind of stuff, but the edge itself is highly refined, and I have not gotten into that aspect. One of the reasons is I have to actually have an artifact next to me while I'm flint knapping in order to get the edge to match. I really can't go by memory on some of those edges. If I want to duplicate the ones on the real artifacts, I can't go by memory. It's just, they're very distinctive. And it requires a different mindset to match the way they sharpen them. And also the tools have something to do with it as well. This particular edge sharpening technique works well with metal tools, but you have a little bit better. I wouldn't say better, but you have more of an opportunity to play around with the different sharpening techniques with antler. Believe it or not, antler gives you a little bit more leeway. It's more versatile as for sharpening than a metal tool is. In my experience, anyway. Yeah, I seem to be very confined with the type of edge I'm able to do reasonably well with metal. I can't seem to be able to branch out into other edge sharpening techniques with metal. Anyway, I'm going to put that to the test as well. We'll see. Yeah, I might just make some more aluminum pressure flakers and see how that goes. I didn't really like them all that much, although they do work. Don't let anyone tell you that aluminum does not work for pressure flaking, because it does. You just got to get the hang of it. If you've been using copper a lot and you go to aluminum, you're going to think aluminum is way too soft. Okay, so I'm just going in, I'm picking at it. Going down the edge, picking at spots that look like I can actually seat the flaker and not mess up the symmetry, you know. Sometimes I'll make a mistake and not pay attention to the symmetry, and I'm flaking where it's dull, and I end up losing too much of the edge and blah, blah, blah. So I'm pretty sure I'm being careful here as far as symmetry goes. Yeah, a little bit of an edge view. Not quite the hollow ground effect that I was going for, but still sharp, a little bit jaggedy. Looks good. I think it looks good. Okay, so winding down. Got a minute or so left. About 5 1/4 by 2 inches. I can't, yeah, I remember having a hard time grabbing the tape measure with the glove on. All right. 5/16. It's not quite a 1/4 inch. If it was a 1/4 inch by 2 inches, that's 8 to 1, right? It's not quite that. But I am happy with it. Yeah. Turned out all right. I took some chances with it. Luckily, no major mishaps.